Hello and welcome to a very unusual episode from Lowestoft Town Council Watch. Yesterday there was a meeting. Finance and governance, which is usually a quite dull meeting, to be perfectly honest. But I've decided today that I'm just going to make comments as a member of the public on some of the things that were discussed, and try to remain impartial. Trying to remain impartial on LTC meetings is actually quite difficult, because usually the whole thing is it's the behaviour of the participants that is what drives me forward. So good behaviour sometimes, but mostly bad behaviour. And the other aim, of course, is that sometimes these meetings go on and on and on for hours, and I sort of distill it down to some highlights, or sadly lowlights really. Now I can't do that in this one. There's a very good reason for that. I spotted on the agenda that there's some fairly serious goings on, and they are going to be discussed in the confidential setting at the end. Now, I'm a member of the public. I've got no special knowledge about what goes on behind the scenes. All I can draw on is what I hear in the meetings and what I hear and see people talk about on social media. Meetings, I suppose we should take as fact, and social media is just a collection of people's opinions all clumped together with conclusions, right and wrong. But that's the nature of social media. This meeting was a bit different. Essentially, all I can tell you is that my impression from what I read on the agenda and what I gleaned during the items before that particular agenda item was that there was a sense of unease and trepidation. There was a sort of an axe hanging over the sort of meeting. Something was about to happen. Now, that's just me reading body language and the sort of comments that come forward. I'd missed one item on the agenda completely. Andy Pearce wanted to talk about suspending the live feeds on YouTube. Now, you'll remember at the start of every meeting there's the blurb, and the blurb goes like this.
Reporting at meetings. In the interest of openness and transparency, councillors and members of the public are reminded that the law permits any person to film, record, photograph or use social media in order to report on the proceedings of a meeting of the council or its committees when they're open to the public. The Town Council will record this meeting.
So that's what they say at the start of each meeting. Now, oddly, the live streaming part of our council's service is optional. They don't actually have to do it. East Suffolk Council and Suffolk County Council do. So they stream theirs because they have a duty to. Our council, of course, don't. You have the option of going to the meetings. So a member of the public, like me, could go to the meetings. Now, if my interpretation of the rules is correct, and it may be wrong, but it's certainly my interpretation of reading the rules, is that if I go to the meeting, I can record what's said. I can take photographs, and as long as I don't use lights and things like that, that's okay. So the meetings themselves, even if they're not live streamed, I could go and record and then comment on. So I don't quite see what removing the stream would actually do. I wondered if it was just because the subject material sometimes gets people a bit wound up and carried away. But Andy Pearce in the meeting makes it quite clear that what he's actually after is preventing wrong and ill-informed comment by people present at the meeting being stuck out there for people to see. Now, you have to remember that in most cases, the minutes of a meeting are the official record of what happened. That doesn't mean to say they are what happened. They're the official record. Do you remember back in a previous video where somebody swore, and there was quite an argy-bargy bit. The official in charge, which was the town clerk in that particular case, she said, what we will do is put in the minutes that an inappropriate word was used and the person who used it apologised. Now, that is what would go in the minutes. The fact that there was a huge bust-up when it happened doesn't go in the minutes. The minutes, to a degree, are sanitised. If they're not in the minutes, they did not happen. So the minutes themselves do not reflect the tone of a meeting. They don't reflect what individual participants actually say. They just are an official record of what was said. The live stream, on the other hand, gives you people's expressions. You see people sort of doing the, and there seems to be a question about whether that is suitable. I do take the point that Andy said that it might be a temporary thing, but I don't want to have to come to every single meeting with a recorder and a notepad and actually make notes of what was said by who and in what way. It seems a bit odd. Now, normally I'd play you snippets of the meeting and I'd comment about them, and sometimes I might take the pee. When people say something completely stupid, I will comment, or at the worst, you might get my eyebrows go up and down a bit. I've been told I'm a bit smug. Well, maybe I am. If I am, well, that's just me, isn't it? But realistically, I'm the eyes and ears of you lot who watch these videos. So if you like, I get inflicted some of these dreadful meetings to save you having to watch the whole thing. And they were talking about numbers of streams of these meetings. Well, very few people will watch them live. There's no point, you need to be sitting down there ready to actually sort of stomach what comes next. But in this particular meeting today, there's so much going on, I don't think it would be fair for me to comment on individual sections. So what I'll do is try and distill what I, as a member of the public, understood from this meeting. And some of the things that I've understood, I may have got wrong, because there's no detail in this meeting at all. All that actually happens is people talk about things, and the people in the room clearly know what they're talking about, and us folk at home have to guess. So some of my guesses may well be wrong, but I'm only going on what I'm hearing. What I'm going to do is explain a little bit, and then I've edited out most of the finance stuff and just left the somewhat shambolic section that happened. And clearly something was going on. There's an awful lot of facial expressions in this meeting because they're talking about very sensitive things, and they've got to talk about these in the open session. The confidential bit at the end we don't get to know about. And the confidential bit is probably the serious bit. A data leak. I'm going to conclude that one of the councillors has mentioned in public at some point something that was discussed in one of their confidential settings. So I don't know what it is. My guess is it's this ridiculous ting-ding thing. Now, that thing has just escalated beyond all proportion. For those people that are joining this late, the ting-ding situation is essentially a tenant of the council have got some land on the seafront. There's a fence around some of it, and it's all got a bit heated. Clearly, from this meeting and previous meetings, the legal opinion seems to be that what they've done is okay. They're allowed to put a fence around it. One of the councillors has made it a bit of a quest to try and get the fence removed. And my guess is that the ting-ding thing is the thing they want to talk about at the end. Although that might not be the case. You'll also see another little bit in this video that follows. And I do apologise, but I can't make it shorter than about an hour. So I'm going to put that on the end of the video. So that'll be the the stuff to watch out for. And I'm going to put it on the end. I'm not going to make any comments about it whatsoever, and I'll leave you to form your own opinion on what they're talking about. Heads up, there is a little bit that suggests that somebody has made a complaint about a member of staff, because there's a discussion about how if a councillor is complained about, it goes to East Suffolk Council's monitoring officer. And East Suffolk Council's monitoring officer is the person who looks after it. If you make a complaint about a member of staff, we don't even know who it is. But if someone does make a complaint about the member of staff, they're talking about that. So my conclusion is that a complaint has been made. The weird thing, of course, is that if you make a complaint against a member of staff, they talk about the fact that the mayor would be involved. Now, clearly, if the mayor's involved, that must mean that the person who's had the complaint made about them is a senior person. Because if you made a complaint about any other member of staff, their line manager or the acting town clerk would be the arbiter of justice in this particular case. So the only time the mayor is going to be involved is when the complaint is about someone who doesn't have a boss. See the problem? So by actually talking about it, you're revealing things. So I think I've worked out who the complaint's been made against. And then they try and talk about it as if nothing has happened. It's really bizarre. And this meeting, sadly, is a classic example of the reason I started this channel. Because the chair of the meeting, Andy, and Wendy Brooks, the councillor, spend an entire hour arguing with each other. Now, I'm not going to say in this particular video who's right, who's wrong, in my opinion. I'm just going to say that's what happens. There is shouting. There is a bit of walking about a bit, going out the room, coming back. There's lots of heads in hands. There's lots of disagreement. The other councillors, I have to say, and poor old Neil Colby is sitting the closest to the camera all the time. And I have no idea how he kept his face as impassive as he does. It's very difficult. But realistically, it's an incredibly bad-tempered meeting that's sort of half secret. We don't quite know what they're talking about, so we have to guess. People are warned not to say things. They carry on saying things. They're warned again. They're warned again. It's just ludicrous. This was probably in the whole year that I've been holding Lowestoft Town Council to task over the way they do something. This is the worst video I've ever seen. There's no swearing. There's plenty of shouting. There's total disagreement, 100% between just two people mainly. A few other councillors will try to diffuse things a little bit, but then that puts them in the rather awkward circumstance of being for one person or against another. You know, it's not policies that they're talking about, it's individuals. The whole thing in this meeting, as you'll see if you've got the patience to weed through it, is individuals. Andy's move by putting one of the agenda items up to stop the live streaming is because he doesn't want things that get said in meetings when people get carried away to impact on people's viewpoint about the council. I think I've understood that right. But clearly, what we see when they're talking about people's impression of the council is exactly what it is. It's war. With two people, the prime motivators of dissent. All the other people at this meeting are perfectly logical, nice people. And you can see they're trying their best to keep things on level playing fields. So the town clerk, the acting town clerk at one particular point, tries to modify things and just bring the temperature down a bit. But no, by that time, two people are at war and they're steaming against each other. One speaks, the other yells at them. The other one speaks, the other person makes funny remarks or looks as if sort of she's about to say something and doesn't. It's absolutely childish. And I sort of felt a bit sorry for both of them, really, because clearly both people had a viewpoint. But those two councillors are incapable of being in the same room as each other without scoring points, because that's all it is. It's point scoring. So today, no smugness, no silly jokes. I'm not going to tell you anything that's like daft. We're just going to watch the video. And if you like, you can switch off now, because there will be no more silly comments from me. But what on earth was going on? And bear in mind that this was in the public section, which was not directed at a person who leaked data. We don't know for certain who we're talking about, but I suspect that it probably won't ever be released. You know, they're not very good. I mean, the decision to put out a press statement on the Ting Ding thing, well, you know, no, we're just going to defer it and not do it. They've taken legal advice. They know what the answer is, but no, they're not going to tell people. So people are still going to keep talking about it. The Ting Ding thing got so silly that Ting Ding put up on their fence a public statement that actually named Wendy Brooks. So for all the public walking past that place, Wendy Brooks's name is up on a placard on the wall. It's a bit sad. Now, in all honesty, if you are a councillor, I don't think you ever can take your council hat off. You know, you're up there. Your comments in that room matter. And then you can't dilute it by saying, oh, actually, I'm not speaking as a councillor. Well, you are a councillor. You know what you know. You also are present at a lot of the confidential setting meetings where you get all the details, money, contracts, information, legal advice. You can't pretend that you don't know those just so you can make a comment in public on Facebook. That's my view. I think this was an absolute travesty of a meeting. You know, and realistically, I don't think that Andy Pearce should have chaired it, because when you are one of the proponents of dissent, who stops you? There's nobody. The chair of a meeting should be able to stop people when things are getting out of hand. And if it's the chair versus one other councillor, that's just not possible. I don't think either of the two people in this meeting meant to be as awkward or difficult as they certainly came over as being. But it was shocking. I felt really sorry for the officials, because they can't take a part in this. They can't say, stop, be quiet, stop, just cut it. They can't say that. Somebody in the meeting has to do it. And if the chair is one of the people who's getting carried away because he's so cross, as Andy was, I'm not going to say justified, not justified. It's not the point. The chair in a meeting is supposed to be impartial and in control of the meeting. And I think if it's something that is like deeply affecting you, you cannot be that person. Perhaps should have deferred. I think probably in that meeting there, any of those other councillors could have been the chair, any of them, because I think all those other people in that room I've seen be impartial in the past, and it didn't happen today. So anyway, a very unusual council watch. I struggled so hard. I decided I just can't edit this in the way that I would normally do, because it would be wrong. You deserve to see it. The original meeting was 2 hours. I've managed to cut it down to 1 hour by only concentrating on the things that are relevant to what we're discussing. Nothing's been taken out of context. Nothing is moved about. What you see and hear is what happened. And I've just taken out items about sort of water bowsers and things like that. They don't really relate to what we're talking about today. So hopefully you can get through this, and maybe you can speed through some of the duller bits, but you'll discover that pretty much everything that follows here is appallingly bad. And if that's your view of what the meeting sort of was, like it is mine, then, you know, they need to do something about this. Well, we're not going to find out what happened with the data breach. I don't think they're going to tell us that because, as I understand it, if there was a data breach, as in something confidential was spilled to the public, with the amount of spilling that goes on all sorts of topics, we don't even know what they're talking about. I certainly don't. So I've just gleaned a few things by watching this video, but a lot of it's guesswork. So watch this video. I suggest you get yourself a cup of coffee and set aside at least 45 minutes to watch the next bit, because quite frankly, it's dreadful. Anyway, one day I'll be able to say I'm not making any more videos, but at the moment, this is what you need to watch.
Declarations of interest and dispensations 146.1 to receive declarations of disclosable pecuniary, other registrable and non-registrable interest from councillors on items on the agenda. Wendy.
There's a couple of items. One is that I supported Ian Purnell and his fundraiser for homeless veterans, but I have got no financial interest. Similarly, on the Harris fencing and Tingdean, I have no financial interest.
You don't actually have to have a financial interest to have an interest. Under either the code of conduct and or so, you know, the code of conduct speaks for itself, but it doesn't have to be financial. Is anybody biased or predetermined in any way on any of these items? Wendy?
No.
Okay. 146.2 to consider written requests for dispensations for disclosable pecuniary interest and note dispensations granted. In relation to that last item, Sarah, we'll just have to deal with it when we come to the item.
Thank you. Get that amendment made.
Yeah, and I'd also like to request an item be looked at, which was the item on the linked application. It says that I said if certain comments carried on, I would issue an order under section 2. They were repeated and a warning was administered. I just wondered if someone can check the YouTube and if that's verified, whether they can minute that, please. Subject to those, everyone, you have it. Okay, I'll second. All in favour, please. Okay, that's everyone except Wendy. Are you against or abstaining, Wendy? Okay. 151.2 to consider making a donation to the fundraiser by Ian Purnell for the Royal British Legion Industries, the Great Tommy Sleepbout. Just to be clear on this, I didn't declare an interest at the top. I don't have an interest, but I went to, Chris asked if any councillors were free to go to greet Ian when he arrived at Nest Point. Wendy was already there. I went. And I realised that I know Ian. He's a neighbour. He lives in my road. I didn't know him from the name because I didn't know his surname, but I know who he is. But I have no connection with this event in the slightest. And the first I knew about it was the day I arrived to meet him when he arrived at Nest Point. But I do know him. He lives very near me.
Yeah, I'd just like to declare, I know him as well. We've actually just made a donation, the Gunton Residents Association.
All right. Okay.
And I just want to make sure that that is declared.
In that case, I should mention I'm the chair of Gunton Residents Association. I didn't know about the donation because I wasn't at the last meeting. Wendy?
Well, I'm obviously not a member of Gunton Residents Association.
No.
This is a really worthy charity, which is doing something that really shouldn't even be on the agenda, that we have veterans who are homeless. And this charity seeks to help those people into homes and to help them with mental health issues and just doing the job really that should never, ever have to be done. But he's done a remarkable job. He's walked all round from Hunstanton, no further than, I think Hunstanton, or maybe a bit further west, and he's walked all the way around. He's well in his 60s. He camped out every night. He's just a fabulous charity, I think, and I'm not sure how much. I've got 250 in my head. I don't know, but I think we should definitely be giving a donation. I know he's still getting donations in. He'd aimed for 500. It's well over 2,000 at the moment, but I can't think of a better charity for us to be donating to. So I propose that we give him £250.
Oh, I was going to go higher than that
not
one.
him. We give the organisation Tommy's Sleep Out £250.
Oh, I was going to go higher than that. It was yeah. What did you say? Last I knew, he was on his way to 2,000. Did you say he'd gone past 2,000 on his personal? And I think all the other people involved, I think the actual fundraising total for this campaign, because it wasn't just him, there were other people, I think had gone past £1.5 million last week. So I think it's a meaningful campaign, and to be honest, I would like to consider making a more substantial donation. I would have suggested 1,500. Okay.
Absolutely second.
As it's a donation, can I suggest it comes from community engagement rather than grants pot? Is that okay? Are you happy with that in the proposal, Wendy? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anyone else wish to comment before we go to a vote? Okay. All in favour then, please. Okay, that's unanimous. 152.2b, to note a data breach involving disclosure of confidential town council minutes and consider the ICO recommendation as confidential. 152.2c, to consider making a recommendation to full council on the continued live streaming and recording of town council meetings during the civic year 25-26. So I asked for this one to go on. This is mine. So first of all, we have no legal obligation to live stream and record meetings. And we do it in the hope and with the intention that we are facilitating openness and transparency and accountability and participation to some extent. I personally question whether that is happening at the moment because of what is happening in meetings, and there are statements being made in meetings that are not information. And they are being picked up on and commented liberally in public session, and I wonder to some extent whether actually it's counterproductive. There are separate conversations going on about what measures we can legally take around orderly conduct of meetings. We have limited scope in some areas because we have no legal authority to consider any matter that is captured by the Code of Conduct, because that is the monitoring officer's jurisdiction. So, but we do have authority to uphold Section 2 of standing orders, which relates to the orderly conduct of meetings. And we do have discretion on what we do with live streaming and recording of meetings, because that is not a statutory requirement. So I've just put it on here for consideration, really. Wendy, you ought to speak.
Yes, I mean, it'd be a very sorry state if we felt we had to go secret because we felt our meeting somehow couldn't be viewed by the public. East Suffolk Council, Suffolk County Council, theirs are all streamed live. I think we should continue to stream our meetings live and be as open, as transparent as we possibly can. I mean, there might be sometimes members of the public who say things, observe things that we don't particularly like. It certainly happened to me. You live with it. You get on with it. You can't just shutting down the doors and saying, well, we're going to do this behind closed doors, I think is a very retrograde step.
Well, that isn't the suggestion, Wendy, because the fact that we don't live stream and record wouldn't make it a confidential meeting. It would still be taking place in public session and members of the public could come in and listen to it. It's about live streaming and recording specifically.
Yeah,
it's not about, I know what you said, Wendy, and I'm now speaking. And it's about not going into confidential, it's not about going into confidential session. And yeah, all right, Wendy, thank you. You've just spoken. You've just spoken. All right? Now, you constantly pull people up on standing orders, so now remember them yourself, okay? And take direction from the chair, all right? If you want to speak, you'll be allowed to. Okay, so, yeah, East Suffolk Council and Suffolk County Council do it. They're not currently facing the same challenges that we are, where meetings are actually being used to make statements that are actually factually untrue or factually unsubstantiated, or to make accusations. That is a particular challenge that we are facing in some of our meetings, And that is my question about whether we should be facilitating that, because whether it's actually counterproductive for the whole council. It's certainly not openness to actually facilitate the propagation of false statements or allegations. There's no openness about that. It actually could be potentially very misleading, which is why I asked the item to go on here. There are discussions around about how the enforcement of Section 2 of standing orders around the orderly conduct of meetings can be beefed up without the Town Council exceeding its statutory jurisdiction and straying into code of conduct territory. And we've obviously also recently submitted a consultee response on a new national code of conduct, and we don't yet know what may come out of that. So there's no intent to suppress opinions, different points of view, or anything like that. It's actually the propagation of disruption, false statements and accusations is actually hurting the whole council, not just the individuals that it may be directed at, internally or externally. And that's the reason I asked for the item to be considered. Graham.
Yeah, I've just got to say, do we actually know the viewing figure numbers? I assume each committee would have different viewing numbers, and full council probably would have the highest viewing numbers. But I just wonder whether that information is available, which may actually help us make a decision.
If I may reply, yes, it is. If we now go and look at it retrospectively, it won't necessarily be the number of viewings at the time of the meeting being live. So it could be people who've watched it again since it went live. So it'll always be how many people have viewed that item, not necessarily who were there live viewing it, but have looked at it afterwards. I mean, even sometimes the office look at it afterwards for various purposes. So, but yeah, we could do a breakdown of that. And I don't think it is always full council. That's the highest viewing figures, actually. No.
Okay. Wendy, then Paul.
I'm rather surprised at the suggestion that we stop streaming because of some misinterpretation or false information. That's the nature of social media. We know we have no control over that. It's going to happen. I'm rather surprised by Councillor Pearce's response, because I don't think he's actually suffered very much from social media, but I don't know. I mean, I think the council has actually had more publicity.
Excuse me, Wendy. Can you concentrate?
Me.
Oh, no. No, Wendy.
Excuse me.
No, because you are name dropping me. All right, I did not say I had suffered. So can you concentrate, not for the first time, on making your point, but without commenting on what my motivations might or might not be? All right, right. Then do it, please.
Right. Well, as a councillor who probably gets quite a lot of social media exposure from misinformation, the last thing I thought was, I've never thought, well, then we shouldn't have let people look at what's going on. I've never thought that. It's annoying and it makes me angry, but it's the nature of social media and we have to learn to live with it. And to shut down the doors and say we're going to do this all in secret would, to me, as I said before, a retrograde step.
Right. And I will have a right reply on that, because I have not said we should shut down the doors and do things in secret, Wendy. That is a misinterpretation that you are putting on it in a public meeting going out live streaming. This is exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. You are trying to suggest this is a means to do something in secret, which is factually and fundamentally untrue and a misrepresentation of what is being said. So, and who individually might suffer from the scrutiny that happens is not the point of this proposal either. It is about how damaging it is to the town council. No, and you would shrug, exactly. So, but that is the consideration behind this proposal. Not how it affects me, not how it affects you, not how it affects any other individual, but how it affects the town council. And it affects the town council when members of this council are saying things in meeting to misrepresent the position, knowing that it will be picked up and fueled on social media. So, And I have not said anything about doing it in secret, and I've not said anything about doing it permanently. I have said there are other discussions going on around about controls and measures to ensure that meetings can be carried out and that Section 2 of Standing Orders, which relates to the orderly conduct of meetings, can be upheld. My suggestion, and it's not made a proposal yet, but my suggestion with this item is that we consider pulling the live stream until those measures have been agreed and adopted, and then if there is an appetite to resume live streaming, it can be done with those controls in place to prevent the kind of thing that's happening at the moment and the damage that's causing to the town council. Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. I'll do it the other way around, the way I was going to do it. And I agree with what you're saying, because it's not about personalities, it's about the town council as a whole. And I see where you're coming from with that. However, going back to where I was going to start, I do a little bit of research on the people who view the recordings, particularly with my own climate emergency. And I know quite often when we're actually in the room, there's nobody viewing. But when I look at it later on, there are quite a few people who do look at it. So I feel that we would be doing the wrong thing as far as the public are concerned to suddenly become untransparent, if you like, not recording, because I think there'd be the questions would be asked by why we're doing that. So I think Andy's point is very important. It's about the whole council, not about individuals. But would that be the wrong thing to do? Graham's point, if the public are viewing these recordings, they will want to continue that. That's my point.
And that's very true. I mean, the optics are very true, but equally it is not transparent to repeatedly allow the propagation of deliberately false information. There's no transparency about that. It's being deliberately misleading, and a town council platform is being used to propagate misleading information. There's nothing open and transparent about that either.
I'm just wondering what misinformation you think is being shared. I mean, there is misinterpretation maybe, and maybe some misunderstanding, but you're kind of mixing things up and saying that we in the town council.
Yes,
no.
Can
I finish?
Yeah.
Or do you want to just carry on?
No, I'm not mixing it up, Wendy.
Right. You're saying that somehow people watching our meetings, we're misinforming the public in our meetings.
In some cases, yes.
Right, it isn't to do with our behaviour. It's to do with that we are deliberately misleading the public in meetings.
In some cases, yes. Yes, in some cases.
Well, can you give an example?
No, I won't.
Well, I haven't heard anybody.
No, I'm sure you haven't, Wendy.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, I now understand.
Do you?
Well,
I doubt very much. I doubt very much that you do, Wendy. No, it's not about what misinterpretation a member of the public might put on something that someone has said. It is when somebody in a meeting makes an accusation about a colleague or an accusation about an outside body that is either untrue or unverified. Okay? But I put it on here to be considered hypothetically, because whatever examples I might be thinking of, it needs to apply for the future, because what's already happened in the past can't be undone. So it is about limiting the potential for that to happen in the future. What's happened in the past, I can't change. The damage has been done. It is about restricting the ability for that to happen in the future. And yes, there are people who play to the gallery in meetings, knowing that statements they made will be picked up. And sorry?
Statements, but what
yes.
are you talking about? Because if you're going to start, the problem with what you're doing is that you're not saying anything. You're not saying who or what.
Because
you just want to shut down. You just don't want people observing meetings.
Wendy,
why not?
You do this. You do this so often, Wendy. You like to explain what I'm doing. Just concentrate on speaking to your own position and let other people speak to theirs, because you can't speak to other people's position. It's another case, Wendy, of you trying to portray what you want to present. Okay? No, Wendy. Your position, you're here to speak to your position on these issues and what you know. You are not there to misrepresent other people and what they are doing and what their motivations are. Otherwise, I could sit here and do the same for you. No, I've deliberately not mentioned names, Wendy. Yeah, you can, yeah, look at Paul, you have your little sideways glances and play your silly little games in a public meeting. All right, I was being deliberately circumspect and hypothetical because I am talking about future meetings. And it could apply to you, and it could apply to me, it could apply to any future council who's not been elected yet.
And you had two other people wanting to speak,
Yeah.
Councillor Pearce.
So I repeat, whatever has happened in the past and whoever might have put this idea on my mind is largely irrelevant, because this is about future meetings, and it is about preventing meetings being used to abused to deliberately make statements that actually are either untrue or at best unsubstantiated, but which then become associated with the town council. Because if we are genuine about being open and transparent and accountable, then we would be careful and diligent to ensure that what we say is fact-checked. And that it is accurate. And we would not be making subjective comments about the motivations of our colleagues individually. We would just concentrate on our own position and on the facts of whatever issue we are talking about. And that is what I'm getting at, and that is what I'm driving at with this item. So, Graham, and it is most certainly not about wanting to do anything in secret. So, because if the live stream is pulled, the meeting is still in public session. It does not stop a member of the public turning up for the debate. The recordings of the live stream meetings are not the official record of proceedings. The official record of proceedings are the confirmed minutes. And it is also not made with the intention to be permanent. The suggestion, and it's not a proposal at this stage, I haven't made one, the suggestion was, should we consider doing it whilst other measures to ensure the orderly conduct of meetings are being considered and then be implemented at the same time? It was a question, not a proposal. Graham, then Neil.
Yeah, I take some of the points you're making, Andy, and I also take some of the points that Paul's making. It's actually, for a councillor, it's to act responsible, to be honest. Not actually make false accusations to mislead the public. And secondly, as you've just done with Councillor Brooks, to pull them into line when they're actually feeding some inaccuracies out via the cameras. But what I'd like to see is for this to be deferred for full council, for us not to vote for it today and just refer it to full council for them to have a vote on it, because I personally wouldn't like to see the camera switched off, because I think that could be a backward step.
Proposal, Councillor Parker.
Yes.
To make a proposal without a recommendation?
Yes.
Yeah, then I'll second. Sorry, to punt it to full council without making a recommendation. Yep. Wendy, last thing, and then because we have a proposal on the table. Oh, sorry, Neil, I did. Well, Neil first, because he was after Graham. Then you, Wendy, and then that's the last.
Thank you, Chair. The only thing that I was going to add to this is that if it were to be considered, my viewpoint would be that it has to happen after the AGM.
Okay.
Because the AGM has to be held in public, so that anybody who gets to see it knows what's happened and how people have been elected, and there are no actual. It's done in transparency.
Okay, I mean, that's fine. Just to be clear, though, the AGM doesn't have to be live streamed any more than any other meeting, but obviously it would be open that it should be. Yeah. Wendy.
I just want to ask Councillor Parker, as he said I had been misinforming people, and I want to know which piece of misinformation I actually did give to people. As you basically said, I lied.
That's not what I said, Wendy. Again,
You did.
No, he didn't. He didn't name anyone.
He did.
You're misrepresenting. Sorry, Wendy.
You said Councillor Brooks. That's me.
Did
I
he?
said that you just.
I didn't hear any councillor's
No.
name mentioned.
Forget it.
Right. So we have a proposal to send this to full council without a recommendation for a full debate. So all in favour, please. So that's 1, 2, 3, 5. And Bernie, Wendy, sorry, well, no, I'll just call against. Okay, 1 against. Abstentions? Let's add that up. Oh, did you? Sorry.
5 vote for.
Okay, I thought there was one hand down this side as well. Sorry, I didn't see that. Right. Right, so to consider making a recommendation to full council on a public statement setting out the town council's position on the Tingdean Harris fencing and the legal advice on which that position is based. So we are not going to redebate the item, and we are not going to redebate anything else that may be going around in the public domain that anybody is driving in their personal capacity. But we have a lot of stuff being said externally on social media, internally on email, about what the town council has and hasn't agreed, what it is and isn't trying to do. Most of the town council position has necessarily been discussed in confidential session because the legal advice was confidential and we are dealing with a commercial tenant. Any other commercial tenant, the details of leases and contracts would be discussed in confidential session. But there is a lot being said about what the town council is and isn't trying to do, what has and hasn't happened. And I personally think it's way past the time when this town council needs to put out a public statement saying exactly what its position is on this fencing and what it isn't, and on the legal advice on which that is based. People can then draw their own conclusions, but if that contradicts some of the statements that are being attributed to it on social media, then so be it. But I think that a statement of clarification needs to be overdue, because otherwise the social media commentary just takes on a life of its own, and that is what's happened. And I am therefore proposing that we make a recommendation to full council to put out a public statement with the wording of that statement to be agreed with the town council's lawyers, and that is my proposal. But that is just a statement of fact on the town council's position. It is not a commentary on any dissenting opinion.
Yeah, I'd like to second that proposal.
It would be welcome if the town council were to make a statement. I personally would welcome it. I'd like to know what the town council's position is.
Well, you know what the town council's position is, Wendy, because you've been involved at the meetings. So
Actually, no.
yes, actually, no, you were at the meeting, Wendy, when the town council's position and the.
I think you said you made a statement. You're now going to get into an argument.
No.
I am not going to be allowed to answer you, but you will have the floor to say what you please.
No, Wendy.
I was not part of the decision.
Wendy.
That is what I'm saying, and it's absolutely true. I was not at that council meeting.
I will come to you shortly, Sarah. The meeting at which you were at the theatre is not the meeting I was talking about. Right. So as Wendy has misrepresented the town council position yet again, the meeting in which the town council received the legal advice and agreed its position was not the meeting at which Wendy was at the theatre. She was not only present at that meeting, she participated in it. And the confidential minutes will reflect that. So the subsequent meeting at which it was probably also discovered is another thing. But the meeting at which the legal advice was considered, which was held in confidential session, Wendy was present, participated and commented. So she knows very well what that legal advice said and the grounds on which the town council's position was agreed, and she knows it because she was there. Thank you.
I was just trying to smooth waters and add clarity that I think that two meetings are being confused. And as you've just said, there was a meeting a few months ago when the town council, full council, were presented with the legal opinion in relation to the fencing, and that gave a direct action that the town council could consider or not consider the risks around that and the costs involved. The meeting where Councillor Brooks was absent and sent her apologies in, the only item relating to the fencing in that meeting was the town council's position on the petition that Councillor Brooks had raised in her personal capacity, and that's where the confusion has come in, I think.
Exactly
Fortunately,
so.
Councillor Brooks isn't in the room at the meeting.
And the agenda item was to consider the town council's position on the fencing, not the position on the petition, and the legal advice on which that decision was taken. It was not to, and I actually said expressly, not to comment on any dissenting view. All right, it was to explain what the town council's position is and the legal advice on which that position was based. And Wendy was present for that meeting and was privy to that legal advice. So it is that I would like the town council to put out a public statement on. So that is why so the proposal's been made and seconded that we make a recommendation to full council to put out such a statement on the meeting in which that legal advice was considered and that decision was reached on what the town council's position is, and to the extent that we're able to, the legal advice on which that position was based, just as a statement of clarification, to go out publicly with the wording of that statement to be agreed with our lawyers. It is not to comment on any dissenting statement or view. So,
yeah, can I ask a point of clarity on this? Because
yeah,
obviously we're coming up to you're going to have a vote on this, but Councillor Brooks left the meeting for some of the discussion.
yep.
I know exactly what was said. Don't worry, I can imagine
Yeah.
it was the repetition of what's been said.
But the problem
No,
is,
don't
Wendy.
imagine, Wendy.
I won't be voting on this.
That's
anyway.
fine.
Right, that's fair enough. I was going to say, because that I was worried that would be.
That's fine. Thank you. Yeah, and I made mine clear, Wendy. You were there. All right, because what we are talking about is the meeting before the one at which you were at the theatre. We are talking to the one about which the confidential legal advice was presented and considered, and you were present for that.
Yes, I was.
Yes, you were. So,
Yes, I was.
so saying you were at the theatre is an incorrect statement.
I said I was at the theatre because the second meeting misinterpreted the first meeting.
No, the meeting which I said you were present is the one at which the legal advice was presented. Yes, we will. All right, but I am just clarifying.
No, it's just standing order there.
Yes, I know. But I'm just clarifying that actually you can't imagine what was said because you weren't here. Okay? The statement was just to clarify which meeting this was talk about and the fact that you were present. Okay, so we've had a proposal. It's been seconded. All in favour, please. Okay, that's all except Wendy. Wendy, are you abstaining or voting against?
No, I'm abstaining.
Okay, that's fine. You've abstained. 153.3 to review the complaints procedure. Wendy.
Our complaints procedure doesn't work. Basically, we have a complaints procedure that if anybody complains about a member of staff, if a staff member has an issue, that system
Point of order, please.
seems to be.
Point of order, please. Can we please be very, very careful here that
Yes.
that we don't intrude onto live issues?
I'm not going to.
Well,
Can I speak?
just don't talk about if anyone complains.
I am not going to.
Wendy, either restrain yourself within standing orders or you will not be speaking. All right, I am trying to prevent an abuse happening because there is a live procedure. Yes, which you have already alluded to with a member of the public.
Can I speak? Or do you want to carry on?
Speak, but do not make aspersions.
I don't intend to. I was going to say that we have a complaints procedure for staff, which because the staff have and can have union representation, it seems to be a fairer system. Councillors, we have no such system. We basically are asking other councillors to investigate complaints, but those people do not have the experience or the knowledge to do it. They don't have any legal training to actually. You cannot look at a complaint without having some kind of legal training and understanding of the complaint process. So at the moment, if somebody complains to the town council about a councillor, that complaint is sent straight off to the monitoring officer. And those people do have legal training. However, if you wanted to make a complaint about a member of staff as a councillor, that will be handled internally by the mayor, who has it's nothing to do with who the current mayor is. By their very nature, our mayors and councillors do not have the necessary training to investigate that complaint fairly. We need a system whereby we have I was thinking about how can things happen in this way? Because basically councillors have no representation. I was a teacher all my life. I was in the NUT. If I had a dispute with my boss, the headmaster, head of department, usually it would be the head teacher, I would have union representation. As a councillor, I have no representation. And that, I think, is a flaw, not just for this parish council, but for all parish councillors, that we have nobody on our side. And I think we need to have a body, a person, an organisation, a legal representative that we can call in, a kind of HR for councillors, if we need advice or if we need support that is not part of the council. That's my point about our complaints procedure. The moment for councillors, our complaints procedure is either off to the monitoring officer, East Suffolk Council, a very slow and tedious process, but at least it's relatively fair, or an internal one that is not really fit for purpose. So I think we need to look at the idea of somehow, if councillors need some kind of representation because they wish to make some kind of complaint, maybe about a member of staff, where we would deal with it internally, we need to have somebody that we can call in to support us who is independent.
So, two things. The reason if a complaint comes in against a councillor, it goes to the monitoring officer. Yeah, Wendy, will you please leave off? You've just spoken and you've been allowed to speak freely. Okay? Now the chair is speaking. All right? If you don't like it, you're free to leave. All right? Don't keep chipping in with saying, I've already said this, I've already said that. The reason it goes to the monitoring officer is because it is the monitoring officer's statutory jurisdiction. We have no choice. It's not the town council's choice to send complaints to the monitoring officer. We have to, by law. For a complaint that comes to the town council under the town council procedure, they are not just complaints against staff. They can be complaints against town council decisions, against town council policy, against the town council as a corporation. They are not just a mechanism to make a complaint against a member of staff. That is not the purpose of this complaints procedure. The complaints are also not investigated and handled by the mayor. That is an untrue statement. They are triaged by the mayor, deputy mayor, and chair of personnel, who evaluate the complaint and decide how it needs to be handled. That is what they do. They do not investigate and adjudicate the complaint. If they feel the complaint needs investigation, a panel is appointed to investigate it. And then that panel, if further work is needed, then has the scope within the complaints procedure to basically set up the process, the review process or the implementation process for whatever needs doing. Nothing is done by the mayor in that sense. The only thing that would be done by the mayor, deputy mayor, and chair of personnel is if they feel that a complaint does not have merit or is not evidenced and there is nothing accompanying the complaint to investigate. Then they would say there is nothing here to investigate. But if there is something to investigate, they would not do the investigation themselves. That used to be the case, and that was actually changed back in 2020 because it was felt that was unsafe and that one person had too much influence on the process. That is not happened now. The complaints procedure is already underway, and if and when the review of the updates to the complaints procedure are presented and adopted, they would apply going forward. So any live complaints that are in progress would be covered by the current complaints procedure. Any new or updated complaints procedure would not have retrospective effect to either an in-progress complaint or one that's already been decided. So, and there is already scope within the complaints procedure that if a panel is appointed, there is scope within the complaints procedure that that panel can decide who and how it is taken forward. That therefore implicitly includes getting external legal advice if it is felt that the issue warrants it. There is nothing in there that inherently prohibits an investigating panel from calling in legal advice to assist on an individual complaint, each case on its merits. In terms of a general procedure, when it comes to a complaint against a member of staff, the town council is an employer. I have worked for employers in the public sector, in the private sector, financial. They don't call in lawyers routinely to investigate any complaint that comes in. They are handled by experienced and trained members of staff. And in accordance with that organisation's rules and procedures. Depending on the nature of the complaint, specialist legal knowledge might be required and a lawyer would then have been called in. But for 90% of bread and butter complaints, you don't need specialist legal knowledge. You need the knowledge to be able to evaluate a complaint against the organisation's rules and procedures, and they are done internally against those procedures. Yeah, okay. So if a complaint is submitted against a member of staff, it would be evaluated internally by that member of staff's employer. That is fully consistent with the majority of organisations at a stage 1 internal complaint. There is nothing inconsistent about that, and it is not comparable with the Code of Conduct, where the statutory body responsible for investigating a Code of Conduct complaint against any councillor on the district council or any parish councils within that district falls to the monitoring officer on the district, who happens to be a qualified legal practitioner and the head of legal at East Suffolk. So that is just to clarify exactly what this procedure currently does and what it doesn't, because the idea that actually they are just decided by the mayor is simply not correct. And there is scope under the current procedure to call in a lawyer on an individual complaint where it is felt that the circumstances of the complaint warrant it. But as I understand it, the procedure is already under view. Is that right, Sarah? So we will want recommendations to come back to the next meeting?
Yeah, we've worked through the complaints procedure, taken on board some of the comments that have been aired in the last few weeks, and the new document has been uploaded for your consideration with amendments and a sort of a table that sort of sets out the procedure more, that has been uploaded in the members area for you to look at. If you haven't had a chance to do so, then we can defer.
Wendy?
Yes, I have had a look. I've had a quick look at it, and it's still the same problem still remains that councillors have. I mean, Andy's saying you can go off and get yourself a solicitor, but that implies the councillor has to pay.
Wendy, I didn't say that. No, don't puff your lips and roll your eyes. You just said, Andy said, you just said in a public meeting, live streamed, this is what I'm on about councillors using these meetings to put out false information. You just sat there bold-faced and said, Andy said you can go and get yourself a solicitor. I said no such thing. No, I didn't, Wendy. No, I didn't. I said the panel can call in legal advice if they feel legal advice is warranted to handle the complaint. I did not say the complainant has to go and get the solicitor. I did not.
Okay. My point remains that the councillor who is making the complaint is isolated and has no way of getting any support. So, I mean, Andy thinks that our system's great, obviously.
No,
I
no.
don't. I think we need a system. If at the moment, we have a system where to make a complaint about a member of staff from the council is extremely difficult. Not because we don't have the process in place to make it fair. And I think we need a fairer complaint. Unlike Andy, I was a member of a trade union for all of my working life, so I'm not used to this kind of private way of handling things. That I really the having the backing of a trade union is paramount in these situations. As councillors, we have nothing like that. We don't have an independent external person who can help us fight our corner, and I think we need it. And I think that's a national thing that we need. That when councillors have complaints, that they can actually, to make it fairer, actually have a body they can draw on, and that person will support that, not necessarily agree with them, but give them advice and actually give them objective advice, and they will negotiate on your behalf. That is missing from our complaints procedure. That is my opinion.
And you're entitled to it. But equally, you just sat there again, and I keep on saying you do it and you say you don't, and you just sat there again and said, Andy thinks this procedure is great, obviously. Andy has said no such thing. You sit here in meeting after meeting telling other people what I think, and you have no idea what I think. Just speak to your own position and let other people speak to theirs. The other thing is, under the Code of Conduct procedure that you think is basically fair, well, you said it was fair. The complainant does not get any support there either. The independent person is only there to assist the person complained about. The complainant gets no opportunity to speak with the independent person, even where they are submitting a complaint to deal with something that is being done to them to try and get it stopped. The independent person is only available to one party in that complaint. Both parties don't get the benefit of a meeting with the independent person. Trade unions don't negotiate in the adjudication of Code of Conduct complaints. They are not involved in that process. So you're singling out the town council complaint as if it is somehow fundamentally different in that respect, and it's not. You also mentioned about it being decided privately. It's not privately. It's been decided internally. That is not the same thing as private. Most organisations, the stage one complaint handling will be carried out internally by that organisation. That is not unusual. And the panel that is appointed to investigate a complaint has the option under the current procedure to call in specialist external advice if they feel it is needed. They have an option to decide how a complaint should be taken forward and who should be involved. That implicitly includes expert specialist advice where they feel it's warranted. So it is untrue to say that actually there's no provision for that under the current procedure. So you can sit there blowing away all you want, Wendy, but you are making an untrue statement about the current procedure. Yes, you are. You are making an untrue statement if you are saying that is not currently possible. You are making an untrue statement when you are telling other people what I think. So the complaints procedure is under review. Please can we ensure Wendy's comments are fed into that review? And I haven't read the updated thing that have been put on the thing because I've been without a council laptop most of the week, so I don't have access to the members area other than with the console. So can I suggest that we bring it back to May F&G and that we ask May and F&G to make a recommendation direct to the AGM? Okay.
Second.
Okay, all in favour, please, then, as it's been made as a proposal. Okay, that's everyone. 153.5, legal and governance implications and options associated with implementation of the Town Council social media and email procedures. So this is really, it's not the same as the previous item, it's wider than that. It's, obviously, we have limited legal power in terms of how we can enforce our social media. And well, we have more power on like internal communication. We have very limited power to affect what is said in our name on social media and comments that are attributed to us. And so we have a social media policy that said councillors shouldn't do this and shouldn't do that. But if they do, there's nothing we can do about it, essentially. It is really a question of what legal jeopardy does that create for us, if any. And so I really put it on there as a discussion point, but I would really, could I just ask staff to take that away for consideration internally and also for discussion with the lawyer about when we have a situation over which we have limited or no jurisdiction, but in which comments are being attributed in our name, could we get some advice on what the potential legal obligations are to us if the statements that are attributed in our name come to be seen as the town council's position on a certain matter, and B, the options that are open to us, and could that be brought back to the May meeting, please? And I'll make that as a formal proposal. Oh, second. Right, all in favour, please. Okay, just 4 of us. Wendy, against or abstain?
I'm abstaining.
Okay, that's fine. 154. To receive recommendations from the Standing Orders and Policies Working Group on the following policies. I did read these earlier on the public session on the laptop at home, but I haven't got it in front of me because I haven't got my laptop. I've got the concept. So, does anyone feel that anything in that paper they don't agree with, or is anybody happy to take these recommendations on block? Wendy?
Apart from 154.7 that I do have a few questions over, which is representation on outside bodies. So I just think we need to tighten it up a bit. We haven't really looked at it, right? We looked at it a bit, but not really that
So
closely.
if we take that one separately at the end.
If we take that one separately, all the others, I propose we approve.
Okay. The tree one, we were going to have the working group meeting, weren't we, specifically to consider anything that came out of the audit. But I see there's various comments already in there referencing the findings of the audit. So
it's the tree one has been to aid. I looked at it, I modified the beginning so that it was more contemporary in terms of trees value and what have you. Minor changes to things where we'd said we would do things to say we might.
So I have no problem with any of that.
Basic little changes. Aid approved it, so it's come here for final approval.
So I have no problem with the general review of the policy that's been through Aid. Is everybody happy that any findings or recommendations that came out of the tree audit specifically that we commissioned when we brought the grounds maintenance in-house, have they all been fed into this policy because we didn't have that single working group meeting?
Yeah.
Well, yes. Have you seen the tree audit?
I don't need to see the tree audit. I read the policy and there is mentions, the tree audit is mentioned several times.
Right. So if you don't know what was in the tree audit, Wendy, then you can't really speak to whether the findings have been incorporated in the policy.
It's not my fault the tree audit group didn't.
Wendy, I didn't suggest it was. All right? I'm trying to get an answer out of staff. All right? I didn't suggest it was your fault. I am trying to find out whether those comments in the draft policy about the tree audit have been put in there by staff, and whether staff therefore feel that the findings from the tree audit have been captured in the draft policy, or whether a review is still needed.
A review is still needed.
Okay. So, because the draft comments that Wendy's made all look reasonable to me. So all I was going to say is that if they are accepted as they stand, and then we just ask for any additional comments that come out of the tree audit to be fed into that, then it could go to full council then all at the same time rather than separately. I don't have any problem with anything that's in there at the moment. I was just trying to establish whether there was anything else specifically coming out of the audit that needed to be added in. That was the only point to my question.
The tree working group is scheduled to meet again next week, is it?
No, because I tried 3 times to get them together and
Okay.
we ever had.
I mean, as the tree policy stands, there are things within that policy that cause day-to-day operational problems. So it is important that we properly review the tree policy. It's not on your standing orders note, so it didn't get reviewed there,
Yes,
but
it
it
did.
went.
Sorry, Sarah, it went to standing orders and I said I would look at it. This is a while ago. You have had chance to look at it. And if you have major issues with what has been decided, that could have been fed back.
The tree policy was never reviewed by standing orders.
also
It was
not
reviewed.
by-
Wendy,
No.
can you let the staff respond, please?
It was never reviewed by standing orders because they wanted it reviewed by the tree working group, and AID wanted to review it at the same time as the tree working group, which was when AID then said Councillor Brooks could go through it and make comments, which was received and noted and approved at last week's meeting.
Right.
So the only point, the tree policy that was written absolutely yonks ago.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Before all our grounds maintenance was taken in-house, before we'd learnt lessons about accepting grants for free trees and the costs that they brought to the council, before we ever considered what the practicalities are of replacing 4 trees for 1 felled, etc., etc. That tree policy has, as I understand it, been reviewed by Councillor Brooks and by the AID committee.
Yes.
Yeah. At no point have any of our ground staff been able to work with councillors going through the policy on the practicalities of it. And that was the idea of the tree working group, that our grounds and open spaces manager would be a member of the tree working group and we would talk through the policy. That has not happened. I accept that the tree policy has been reviewed by AID, not by standing orders. So it's up to you as a point of governance. If you think that's sufficient review to go forward to the AGM, then yes, maybe it is. But equally, I still think there is things in that tree policy that cause day-to-day operational problems and would like officers to be able to have more input, but we do take on board the committee's input.
Okay, so at the moment, we're not actually discussing the tree policy. What we were actually discussing was whether things could be discussed en bloc or whether it's so. At the moment, we will take representation on outside bodies out and the tree policy, and we'll discuss those separately at the end. So in relation to the other policies there, is everybody happy to consider those en bloc?
As per Taylor's meeting paper that was uploaded, yeah.
So we've got 2 people here, 3 who were at the standing orders meeting. Are you happy that everything in that standing orders briefing is a reflection of what's been recommended? Right. Okay.
Yes.
So are either of you, do one of you then want to make a proposal that we accept those recommendations and recommend these policies onto full council with the suggested amendments? Okay. So Bernie's proposed. Are you seconded, Wendy? Yes. Okay. All in favour, please. Okay.
All right.
So representation on outside bodies. Wendy.
Well,
I didn't vote because I wasn't here for the whole discussion, Chair.
Okay, so all we were doing, Neil, was deciding out of those policies
meeting
which
paper
needed
was true.
individual attention and which could be considered en bloc. So we've taken representation on outside bodies and the tree policy out for individual consideration. So that vote related to the rest.
Yeah, that was what I was saying, Chair, is that I haven't been in here for
Right.
any discussion. So I'm going to just actually sit out on any of these votes.
Okay, that's fine. But the actual recommendations were provided as a supporting paper with the agenda. Wendy.
yes, on the representation on outside bodies, I think this policy was written when the council was very, very new. And I think we now find ourselves that we seem to be representing ourselves. And, I think it just needs tightening up, this policy, so that we know on what basis are we just going along to an outside body as an interested party? And on what basis are actually going along as a councillor, and what is our role on it? I'm not proposing we do it today, but I do think it does need to be looked at to tighten it up.
Well, the
On
answer.
the tree policy.
No, Wendy.
Let's just try and get through.
Wendy, excuse me, look, I'm chairing this meeting. You don't just move on to the tree policy, all right? We're on representation on outside bodies.
Right.
Don't just sit there looking sideways and blowing your lips. If you're unhappy, you can leave.
Well,
all
I'm
right?
very unhappy with where you're speaking.
Right,
but
and I'm
not
very
happy.
unhappy with the fact that you seem to be chairing every meeting that you're in. All right, we are taking the representation on outside bodies meeting. Okay, right, now I'm just coming back on that point because I want to clarify something. All right, representation on outside bodies, our representatives on outside bodies are elected annually by full council. So any councillor who goes along to an outside body as a town council rep is going as a town councillor, and furthermore, they are representing the town council. All right, they are not going there as individuals, which is why we have to declare town council appointments to external bodies on the register of interests, which is why when we then come back to meetings, we then, under the code of conduct, have to declare if we are a town council rep on that outside body, because it is a separate town council interest. So absolutely, we are doing it as town councillors. There is no equivocation about that. That isn't up for debate. We've been appointed by the town council.
Point isn't that. My point is that I think we need to tighten up which bodies we are actually going to be on. There are some bodies where every year somebody is elected to go on it, but that group more
But respectfully, Wendy, that's not the purpose.
meets.
No, I won't, because it is not the purpose of this item. The purpose of this item is to... Right, I will, Wendy, because you've had a lot to say recently, Wendy, about making sure that you speak to items on the agenda. The item on the agenda is a review of the policy about representation on outside bodies. It is not to review which outside bodies we nominate a delegate to. Okay, that is not the agenda item. So, and if you want that, that needs to be full council. Okay, so that is why I stopped you, Wendy. So this is about the policy. If you don't like it, Wendy, you can get up and leave. No, Wendy, you are sitting there rolling your eyes, pursing your... Yes, okay, Wendy. Will you stop keep interrupting? All right, I'm trying to keep this meeting in order and you are trying to take it on to do other things. Okay, this is about this policy. Do you have anything to say about the policy itself?
It's not very well written.
Right, okay. So, the policy itself is designed to cover not just the appointment process, but the reporting process. And because all our delegates on external bodies are appointed by the town council, there is a requirement to report back. And I fall foul of it myself. I don't always report back on every meeting, particularly where that body produces minutes of its own, because I wait for the minutes to be published. So we all fall foul of this to a greater or lesser extent, and I do it myself. I don't submit regular member reports for the bodies that I'm on, and I tend to report when there are material issues to consider. I should report more regularly, so should all of us. But in terms of, we can ask our staff to take into account the way the policy is written, but in terms of the policy itself, regardless of how it's written, does anybody have any concerns to speak to or questions to speak to on this item? Bernie?
I don't really have concerns. We did discuss representation on outside bodies at the last standing order and policies working group on the 12th of March. And what we said there was it was requested that the last two bullet points be amended to make it clear it was the choice of the councillor on how they would report back on the outside bodies. So by that, it's a choice of either sending the minutes in or completing the form.
Yeah, okay.
And it was requested this policy be sent to Assets Inclusion and Development Committee meeting in April for onward recommendation to F&G in April. Yeah.
Okay, and what did they decide? Did they recommend that, subject to the whatever was decided by standing orders, that it should be adopted?
So, when discussing at aid, what they recommended in terms of the policy itself, there weren't too many amendments, and they accepted what standing orders had said. And they said something to be considered is the reporting back to LTC, which was covered in the standing orders comments.
if there should be consideration policy of how many reps are appointed to outside bodies. I think we noted that it's the outside bodies
Yes.
who request the number of representatives
Yep.
to us.
Yeah.
And within the policy, should there be some sort of inclusion of, if the outside body no longer meets, and if it does then become a defunct outside body, how's that kind of reported back in and then resolved so that we no longer appoint them every AGM?
Okay. Sarah.
There's one thing I can't remember off the top of my head, which is pertinent to the policy and something that you said earlier about the role of a councillor. When you're appointed as a councillor to a charity, a registered charity, you act foremost in the interest of the charity, not in the interest of the council. And there's a legal topic paper on that from now. So I just want to check what our protocol says in relation to that. As an aside, I have asked Lauren ahead of the AGM to go through the outside body appointments and just get some feedback if in the last year that body has asked a town councillor appointed to them to attend a meeting or not, and that might help with some of the streamlining that Councillor Brooks is suggesting.
Okay. Yes, but agree on the trustee. That's come up before on specific items that when you're on a trust board, your first duty is to the trust board. Which can obviously create the potential for conflict at times. But it also may accrue individual legal liability for the rep, so they need to understand that. And yeah, and that if there isn't a statement to that effect in the policy, it needs to be in there so that someone knows what they're letting themselves in for if they put their hand up to be a trustee. Right, so what do you want then, Sarah? Do you want to review that separately, or do you want us to make a recommendation to April full council to accept these recommendations, and then you'll feed in any additional comments on the way to full council, or do you want to review it?
Anything that interrupting. Anything that I feed in will only be legal legislation type things from reviewing the policy against the LTN, so I think it can still go to April full council. I'll just highlight anything else I've added to it.
Okay.
Obviously the work about the frequency and what's happened in the last year will be for May AGM anyway.
Okay.
So in terms of the policy, just if I can have a delegation just to check it matches the LTN on charity.
So I'll make a recommendation, and I'll make a proposal that we recommend adoption of the policy with the amendments that have been suggested by standing orders to full council, subject to the fact that staff will further review it against underlying relevant legislation. Bernie seconded. All in favour, please. Okay, you're abstaining, aren't you?
I'm abstaining. Yeah.
Okay. And the tree policy then. Okay, so I've read the paper from Wendy, and as far as updating the policy as it stands, that all looks pretty reasonable for me, but we haven't been able to convene the tree working group meeting to specifically look at the issues that findings and recommendations of the tree order, and we understand that from a practicability point of view, our staff would also like input into that. So my proposal is that, you know, we accept what has been put forward to us, but there needs to be an additional review around the tree order and our staff's input, and that we therefore make every effort to ensure that that review takes place during April, bring this back to May for that additional information to consider, and then the policy with everything, both what has been presented today and whatever comes out of that meeting, can then go to the AGM in one go, and that'd be my proposal. Wendy.
Yes, I mean, it's disappointing that no members of staff have seen it because it has been around for a bit. It is, yes, crucial. Let the members of staff look at it, see which bits. I can't see which bits are impractical personally, but they might be able to. We've cut out the stuff about replacing every tree that cuts down with 2 and all the rest of it. So, I mean, but it'd be interesting to see which bits, right, if any. So but yes, it has to go to the staff to see which bits are impractical and then come back to this meeting. So I'll second Andy's proposal.
That was part of
All right, but they can make suggestions and then it comes back to this meeting in May.
Right.
Yes?
So I made my proposal.
Yes, I seconded
Right.
it.
And then also in that proposal was to consider the findings of the tree audit. So not just staffing, but the tree audit.
Well, that's up to the tree audit working group, which doesn't seem to ever meet.
What did I just say, Wendy? In that meeting in April to carry out that review against the tree audit. That is exactly what I said in my proposal. So if that's what you're seconding, that's fine. But I don't want to come to a next meeting and you say, when was that agreed? All right, it's a two-part process that we have the review meeting against the audit and the staff input during April, and then it comes back in May. Are you seconding that?
Yes.
Right, thank you. All in favour? All in favour, please. Right, that's everyone against Neil who's abstaining. Are you happy with that, staff?
The only correction being I didn't say no members of staff hadn't seen the comments.
Okay, that's fine then, just note that in the minutes. Okay, right. Date of the next meeting, 12th of May, 3 o'clock. Grant.
Can I give my advanced apologies because I'm in the Canaries that week?
Okay. Should staff note those. 156 items for the next agenda and close. Anybody have anything they want to go on at this stage? Otherwise, just add it to the draft agenda. Right, we have at least one confidential item, don't we? I remember seeing. So, 157. To resolve that under the Public Bodies Admissions to Meetings Act 1960, the public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that publicity would be prejudicial to public interest by reason of the confidential nature of the business to be transacted, namely any employment matters and legal issues relating to the matters on this agenda, including the following. 157.1, any legal matters, including those above, as required. All in favour, please. That's unanimous.